going to start sharing, and let's make sure this works. Okay, can everyone see? I'm looking in the chat to make sure that you can see. And I know that there's a little bit of a lag, so I'm just gonna start and, oh, we're good. Okay, awesome. So hi, I'm Charissa Carnall. You can find me on Twitter at Charissa Cowart. This was a really good reminder of changing your Twitter name when you get married. But yes, I am Charissa Cowart on Twitter, and we're going to talk about social listening. So I did want to tell you just a little bit of my background. And Stephanie, amazing presentation. And you and I are so similar. So I think that's really interesting. So I started in television news. I was a news reporter on air for about 3 years. And at the same time, around 2009, I kind of fell into social media. I was contacted by a startup company who asked me to come run their social media. So I became a social media manager. The startup company was then bought by Western Union Financial Services, which is a global company. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Western Union in this presentation in just a little bit. And from there, I led the global community management team at Western Union for about 5 years. I then moved back into managing social media for my alma mater, which is Samford University. That's Sam, not Stan, down here in Alabama. And I was there for almost 3 years. And just in January, I left and joined the brilliant team at Teach for America. And I am the National Director of Social Media at Teach for America now. So, unfortunately, I wish I had more that I could share with you from my current role at Teach for America, but because I'm so new, and as you all know right now, with the state of things, everything is literally being flipped upside down with social media. So hopefully in the near future, I can share a little bit more about what we're doing at Teach for America. But I hope that what I can share with you today is useful for you and helps you to think a little bit differently about how you might be thinking about your content strategy, and specifically around using social listening. So I do want to ask how many of you are currently using social listening for your brand or your organization? And I also want to know, I'm going to talk a little bit about social listening and social monitoring. And I'm curious how many of you would raise your hand and say that you're using social listening, or that you are using social monitoring, or if you don't really know the difference, feel free to say that as well. So I'd love to hear that in the comments. And I know a lot of you are working and listening to this simultaneously, and so totally fine if you can't interact, but I do like to see the comments and see the interaction. So social listening, let's get started. So what is social listening? I took this from netbase.com. So NetBase is one of the social listening tools out there. It is an incredible listening tool if you have the capacity and the resources to be able to tap into something as robust as NetBase. This is an incredible tool. Later on, I will tell you a few other ones that are really good for listening. But I just wanted to read this really great definition to you from NetBase. Social listening provides an overall and all the time baseline for your brand to work from. It's a detailed analysis of your audience, what they care about, and where they discuss such things. It's about uncovering and aggregating all the information you are missing if you only count likes and mentions. So if you are not using social listening right now, this is a really good way for you to hear that if you're only looking at your analytics in terms of likes and mentions and shares, and even kind of looking at what those comments are, you're really missing out on a lot of what you can pull from the data and from your audience and what they're talking about and what they care about. I am a really big, oh, Eric says it's the first time he's hearing the phrase social listening. Awesome. Yes, Meltwater is one of those. Great. Okay. So hopefully this will be really useful for you, Eric, and for everyone else listening. I'm a big proponent of talking about what your audience wants to hear and talking about what they care about. it obviously always has to come back to something related to your organization. So I don't mean that you should just start talking about scuba diving gear if that has nothing to do with your organization. But I think it's important to listen to what your audience is talking about and what they care about, and figure out how it ties into your organization and how that can work. So let's talk about why it's important. And this is the point where I say it's not the same as social monitoring. So social monitoring is very important, and that's more on like the PR side of things, where you're monitoring for your brand's reputation, and you are making sure that no one is saying anything really negative, or that there isn't a lot of comments coming in about one particular thing that could really be detrimental to your brand or to your organization. And so that's monitoring. That's just, we're keeping a pulse on what is happening on our channels so that things don't get out of hand without us knowing that they're getting out of hand. So listening is a little bit different and takes it a step beyond. So it's a broader look at the overall social landscape, and it makes those anomalies a little bit easier to spot. So monitoring is that important preventative, but it's not the consistent proactive approach that listening is. And so monitoring will alert you to like a single problem that you can then solve in that moment. So you have a customer who's very angry about a purchase, or for those of you in higher ed, you have a student who's really upset about something that has happened in the dorms. So that's one problem that monitoring is going to flag that, and you're going to be able to see that and hopefully be able to respond very quickly and address it. Social listening is more the ongoing, could be issues, but what we're going to talk about today is the ongoing conversations and how we can turn those into content and really building better and stronger relationships with our audience. So this is from Linkfluence. So Linkfluence is another listening tool that is incredible. I'm familiar with Linkfluence. I haven't actually used them with a brand just yet. But I have been really impressed by the kinds of data that they are putting out there. So as you can see here, this is data that they are pulling regularly. They're constantly updating with new reports. And so they're looking at like, what are millennials eating, and how is social data pushing the innovation in the trends for food related to millennials. And then I love the one about the fashion trends and dad shoes, and how luxury fashion brands started a sportswear trend with controversy. So these are some reports that they have provided for you to take a look at. This is some of the things that you can see through social listening. They're doing a much more high level, broad approach into just any kind of genre, but of course you can get very specific for your organization. Sarah, thank you. Yes, and Sprout is one of those that I do mention later on. So what I want to talk about is Western Union, and how we at Western Union, when I was there, we use social listening to determine our content strategy. So let me tell you just a little bit about Western Union as a brand. So Western Union's a global Fortune 500 company. The idea around the company is to send and receive money to family and close friends. What we found was that our customers primarily lived outside of their home country. So they were born in one country and they had moved to another country for many different reasons. And while being in this other country, they were typically sending money back home to their family, or they were in another country to study and they had family sending money to them. And so because the majority of our customers did not live in the country that they were from, but they were also building kind of this new life in the country that they were now living in. And so they were kind of caught in the middle between a new culture and then the culture that was so familiar for them. And so Western Union was that kind of piece that was bridging them back to their families for so many of them. And so this is kind of what our content looked like prior to the content strategy that we developed using social listening. So prior to our new content strategy, we were talking a lot about ourselves. which I think a lot of brands do, a lot of organizations do. And in some ways, like, it just makes sense, right? You want people to know who you are. And you hear that a lot. Like, we want people to know who we are. We want them to know our personality. And that is absolutely true and accurate. But as you can see here, we were very proud that we were represented at the Clinton Global Initiative, which in the world of fintech, like, that's a big deal. But for our customers, that means absolutely nothing, right? Like, that doesn't connect to them in any way. Or we were showing events where we had a presence and we were handing out swag, and we were taking pictures with some customers, and that's great too. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, it just kind of leaves those who weren't at that event, they're kind of left with FOMO. And we didn't really want to do that. We wanted them to feel like they were a part of our content and a part of the community that we were trying to build on social media. We wanted them to feel and be a part of that. And so we used social listening, and we looked at what our audience is talking about on social media. And we found that the number one thing that was consistent across the board for our customers and our audiences, and those who would be like our potential customers, was food. And we decided, what if we created content around food? And we took this to senior leadership, and as you can imagine, initially got a lot of pushback because we're a financial institution. That has nothing to do with us. Food has nothing to do with who we are and what we do. And our response was, you're right, it doesn't. It has everything, though, to do with our customers, because what we found is that food was connecting them back to their home, cultural dishes that they were missing because they weren't getting these dishes back, from home, because they're now in a new culture. And these were the kinds of things that really connected them back emotionally to home and to family. And I know if any of you have been out of your home for a while, then, like, for me, I live in Alabama, and sweet tea and grits are just commonplace here. And when I used to travel a lot to Canada for work, you couldn't find that. And so after long periods of being away from it, when you come back and you just have that big glass of ice cold sweet tea, it's really refreshing, and you're like, oh, this is home. And so you can imagine that these customers were, not only were they out of their home, but they were out of their country. They were thousands of miles away. They weren't around their family. And so what we found is that food and dishes were what were connecting them back to home. In the same way, we wanted Western Union to be the thing that connected them back to home as well. And so what we did is we decided to kind of marry those two. And this is what our new content strategy looked like. So we started posting content strictly around food. We would post recipes, dishes. Sometimes they were cultural, based on cultural celebrations that may have been happening at that time. And we would just post the dishes, ask people questions about it, like, which one is your favorite? How do you make this particular dish? How do you make meat cannelloni? And it was so interesting to see the conversations that happened around this, because all of a sudden they felt part of this, and now they were seeing something visually that connected them back to home and to family from a brand that they weren't expecting that from. Like, they would have never expected Western Union, who typically was just telling them about the exchange rate for that day. They weren't expecting to see us talk about something that was so close to them. And so all of a sudden we had this connection with our audience that we didn't have before. We had a new relationship with our audience, and they were engaging with us in ways that we had never seen before. Now, I will say, on top of this, we also implemented the community management team, which is where that's the team that I led in the role that I had at Western Union. And so we did marry this with new content that really spoke to our audience. But at the same time, we had community managers who were responding immediately. As soon as someone commented, we were there to respond. And so not only did they see that the content related to them, but we were engaging with them 24/7. We actually were a 24/7 community management team, and in 5 languages. And so we were responding, didn't matter what language they were speaking, we were there to respond, and didn't matter what time of day or night, we were there to respond and keep those conversations moving with them. And so I did want to mention that because it wasn't just about pushing the content out and then letting it sit. It was also about keeping those conversations moving as people were commenting on it. And so I want to mention some of the things that we started to see beyond the conversations about food. We started seeing customers tell us that they trust us. And guys, I don't know when the last time that you went to a brand and told them on Facebook or on Twitter that you trust them. But it's not that common, right? Like, I know I don't do that often unless I have a really big reason. But we were seeing this every single day because all of a sudden they had a new reason to connect with us in a way that they never had before. So we heard things like, "Thank you, Western Union CEO Hikmet Ersik. I just watched the video. I really appreciate, and my trust is always yours because my family trusted me to send money for them. Thanks again." Or, "We always trust Western Union for almost 15 years. 15 years of being a customer. And for the first time, this person is telling us that they trust us on Facebook because of this new relationship that they felt that they were building with us. Thank you, Western Union. I finally can bring back my grandma from the hospital. God bless you." So those were just a few examples, and I literally have folders on my computer of screenshots and examples of these same kind of messages. The other interesting thing that we saw with this new content strategy was we actually had people come onto our Facebook page in the morning and tell us good morning, engage with our content throughout the day, and at the end of the day, they would tell us good night in a comment. And this was not one person. These were several people who would do this several times throughout the week. And so we became this this other person, this other personality that they were able to engage with regularly. And again, that just built the trust between our brand and our customers, which was incredible to see. So ultimately, we transitioned into this campaign. All the food content that we were creating, we came up with this campaign called Woo Homecooked. And we asked people to tell us what flavors they missed from home. And you can see some of the examples here of the amazing user-generated content that we started to bring in. Again, this was well after we had established this food content strategy. So people were seeing that we were consistent with this. This wasn't a one-time thing that we were just gonna post for 1 month for a food campaign. This was our content strategy. And they were seeing this regularly. And so asking for something back from them was so easy because they had already seen the value of the content that we were creating, and they were happy to share their pictures with us. And so Woo Home Cooked was a really interesting campaign where we ultimately brought in our customers who we considered to be some of our top customers in our flagship agent location, which was in New York City. And we brought them in and asked them a few questions and ultimately picked 3 customers who we wanted to celebrate and do something really awesome for. These were customers who had been living away from their family for a significant amount of time. And we turned this into like a pop-up dining experience for them. I can share the link to this later in the comments. I just grabbed a screenshot because I know with streaming like this, videos get really choppy and things. And so I didn't want to try to play this whole video here and it be a bad experience for you. But it is an incredible video for you to watch and see what transpired. So what we did is we spoke to the families of these customers. So here is one of our young customers who had moved away from her family and to a new country actually she had moved to the US to study. and she had not seen any of her family for years, and they hadn't had a chance to come and visit her because of the expense of travel. And so we FaceTimed with her mom and recreated her favorite dish from home based on her mom telling us exactly how to do it. And when you watch the video, it's incredible because you'll hear her say like, no, you have to whisk it faster. And we actually had professional chefs who made the dishes. And then we had this little pop-up shop in our agent location where when they walked in, it was set up as if it was their dining room at home. We had family photos on the walls, and then we let them FaceTime with their family as they ate the dish. And then for some of them, we were able to gift them plane tickets to either go back and visit their family or to bring their family to New York to visit them and see their life there in New York. For one of our customers, not this particular customer, but for one of our customers, she had not seen her mom in years and had found out several months before that her mom was not going to be around much longer. And they had received a bad medical diagnosis, and she really wasn't sure if she would see her again. And so we were able to give her that plane ticket to go back and visit her family. And so these are like life-changing experiences, right? And the reason I'm telling you this part of it is because it started with us listening to what is it that our customers care about and what is it that connects them back to home, and then building a content strategy off of that, which turned into a campaign, which turned into life-changing moments for some of our customers. And so this is just an example of kind of where you can go with something like this. It doesn't have to go this far, and maybe you don't have the resources to do something like, and right now we can't buy plane tickets for people to go back home and things like that. But just think about ways that who is your customer and what would mean the most to them, and how can you take what you're seeing in social listening that pops up, and the topics that bubble up to the top that you're seeing people talk about the most. How can you use that to connect your audience with what you do as an organization? And so just transitioning a little bit over into how can you actually use social listening to determine content strategy and bring value to your audience? Just 4 key points. The first one is to think of your audience first. And I think that is so important, whether you're using social listening or not. I think it's important to be thinking of your audience first. What is the experience for them? What is it like for them to engage with your content? What are they feeling and thinking when they see your content? And are you bringing value to them? What you're putting out there, is it something that is helping them? And so when it comes to social listening, always thinking of your audience first, not thinking of your own agenda, but thinking of them first. And then how can you match that with what you do as an organization? Checking your monthly analytics is really important. And just looking at what is working and what isn't. You can work on something really hard and really love it, and you feel like it was the best you've ever done. And then when you look at the analytics, you realize that maybe you didn't get the response that you thought you would. We've got to be okay with that. And we've got to be okay to change course just a little bit. And that brings me to the next point, which is to be flexible. And really right now, in the state that things are in right now with coronavirus, this is a really big one, obviously, to be flexible. I know right now at Teach for America, we have really had to put a lot of things on hold in terms of our content and our content strategy and what we're pushing out, and change course and think about what can we do as an organization of educators. How can we get resources and support out to parents, to teachers, to families, to individuals who are dealing with this right now? And so many of us, and all of you probably are working at home now, and you have your kids running around. And I actually locked my door so that my 4-year-old didn't come running in during this. And my husband is home too, by the way, so she's not by herself right now. But So be flexible, be willing if you decide to take this approach with content. And once all of the craziness is over, if you decide that this is something you want to try, be flexible and be willing to change what you're already doing right now and to try something new. Think about Western Union as your example, where we were an organization and a company that was sending and receiving money, and then we started talking about food. But think about where it took us and what the things that we were able to ultimately do for our customers and the kind of relationship we were able to build with them. And then lastly is stay consistent. When you start with something new, it's going to feel like it's not working because your audience needs a little bit of time to kind of take it in and see what exactly you're doing and realize the value that you're bringing them. But stay consistent. Like, they are going to recognize the consistency and reward that back with the engagement and the conversations that you'll see on your content. So I know a few of you have been asking that about listening tools. NetBase is the tool that we used at Western Union. So I highly recommend that if you have the resources for a tool like NetBase. Linkfluence is the one that I showed the examples of a little bit earlier in the presentation. They are doing some amazing things. And if you have events that you'd like to just listen around events, I am 99% sure that they have the geolocation option to be able to listen just within a certain fence location. So if you have an event in the future, clearly this is all outside of what we're living in right now, but if you have an event that you want to listen to what's going on within that event, you can do that through Linkfluence. Sprout Social is another one that has an incredible listening tool that is on top, in addition, on top of their kind of basic tools, as well as Sprinkler. Sprinkler has a really good listening tool as well. So if you're already using Sprinkler or Sprout Social, I would definitely ask them about their listening tools and how that, you might be able to use that. And then Linkfluence and NetBase are pretty much listening only. So those would be tools that you would have separate from your traditional social media management tools. And yes, please, if you guys have others, I only put the ones that I have used because I didn't want to recommend anything that I'm not familiar with. So I did only mention the ones that I have personally used or have talked to the team at at the tools, like Linkfluence, for example. I know some people on that team pretty well. So please, if you have others that you've used and work well, please put those in the comments for everyone. So thank you so much. Like I said, I'm Charissa Cowart on Twitter, Charissa Carnall everywhere else. I'm so sorry. I will get that fixed. And please feel free to email me if you have any specific questions or anything that you want to talk through, charissa.carnall@teachforamerica.org.